Okay, we're continuing with the book here, the How the Scots Invented the Modern World. Okay, and the main focus of this book was about the scholarship of the Scots, how smart they were, and where it came from. I had read several other books about the Scots. I have friends who are Scottish, and I've watched videos a bunch of videos about them. But the main point of this book was around the 1600s, the Scots decided, we got too many illiterate people. We really need to make the masses literate. And so we need to have a school system. And the entire focus of the school system should be to read the Bible. And by focusing on reading the Bible, the Scottish population became way, way more academically smarter. And they produced a whole bunch of geniuses. And they actually were sort of the leading intellectual country of the 1700s. Which is quite remarkable. It's a tiny little place. It's only got about 5 million people. It's the size of one city in America, okay? And I'm also going to tell you, it's the power of Christianity. I have studied a lot of history. So most people nowadays, they've all been brainwashed by public schools and multiculturalism and all this nonsense. So they think all cultures are equal. No, that's not at all true. In general, non-Christian cultures do almost nothing. That's a fact. Yes, there's exceptions to that. But if you go back historically, before 1900, almost all of this academic intellectual stuff came out of Christianity. Okay, after 1900, a little bit from some other places. And then after 1970, more and more countries, excuse me, started doing stuff. But I'm just telling you, before 1900, Scotland had produced more academic achievements than all of Asia, India, Africa, and South America combined. Don't take my word for it. This is all in the books. Just start looking up the books. These countries, if they didn't have Christianity, they would not do much academically for the simple reason Christianity says study nature to honor God. It's a rational universe. We are created in the image of God, therefore we can too be a creator, and we can think his thoughts after them. Okay? That makes you want to do science. All right? That makes you want to study. Versus if you just say, life is unknowable, try to make a little money, try to get laid, help your family. That's what most people do. Then you got no motivation to do science. Science is not a normal thing to do. You have to be a little bit of a freak. You have to care more about the science than about making money, than about getting laid, than about being popular. As a matter of fact, quite often when you do science, you make people hate you. People don't like it when you correct them. They find that offensive, okay? Look at Semmelweis. He got killed because of it. Okay, so you have to be careful about correcting people. They find it very offensive. All right, but that's the fact of the matter. Science comes from Christianity. So whenever you hear somebody say, reason is based on atheism, you don't need science, that's completely untrue. With atheism, what you're saying is basically atheistic Darwinism, that humans are talking monkey with no rights. They're just farm animals owned by the ruler. And when you start thinking that way, which most dictators do, then the people have no rights and they get treated like crap, so they have no time or leisure or money to pursue academics. They just work as slaves all the time, like in the Soviet Union. Look at the Soviet Union. After 1919 takeover, the country produced close to zero to nothing, okay? Soviets, you basically think of them as third world barbarians. I know lots of people from Eastern Europe, and that's what they all say. Soviets are third world barbarians, okay? That's their attitude about them. Okay, so let's see here. Around 1700, the big push to learn the Bible, as soon as they started reading it, they're mostly Calvinist and Presbyterian. They spent a lot of time. Presbyterianism is better than Calvinism. It puts more emphasis on leadership by the elders of the community, not so much this predestination stuff. Edinburgh was the capital city of Scotland, the major center of Scotland, and it's a small town by modern standards, so all these scholars knew each other, okay? Arthur Herman describes Edinburgh in 1700 as a forest of chimneys. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to get into some more of the history of Scotland. So here is the Bonnie Prince Charlie, sort of like the leader of the Catholics trying to reestablish Catholic rule in Scotland. And he was able to conquer Scotland, but when he pissed off Britain, they outnumbered him 6-1, so Britain came back and kicked the crap out of him and killed most of his men. It was pretty brutal. Like Cumberland, one of the generals from the British, just hunted them down and massacred them. So it was pretty bad. A lot of Highlanders were involved in the revolt of Bonnie Prince Charles. Here's the song I had meant to share with you, the last one. I'll try to remember to link it on this one. Loch Lomond by Peter Holland sings the best version of it. You take the high road, I'll take the low road, and I'll see you in Scotland. I'll be there for you. It's a beautiful song. I can't do it justice by saying the lyrics. It's a magnificent song. Okay, here is the release of the prisoner. This was painted by John Everett Millay. He is one of the pre-Raphaelite. He's actually the leader of the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood of Painters, and it's obviously spectacular, magnificent. You can see the Highlander with the kilt there, being released from prison. A lot of them weren't so lucky. The model for the painting is actually the wife of J. Everett Millay, who was previously the wife of John Ruskin. That's a long story how that happened. Ruskin was kind of crazy, but he was a genius. Okay, here is Scotland the Brave. Another one of these songs for the bagpipe. Okay, and it's magnificent. Scotland's very much about honor and bravery. The X is for the cross of Andrew. He was crucified in the shape of an X on the cross, and that's why you have the X on the Scottish flag. St. Andrew is the patron saint of Scotland. Here is Amazing Grace, magnificent. The Scottish Dragoons, they're fantastic. They got fantastic version of, it's the best bagpipe version of Amazing Grace, the Scottish Dragoons. Okay. It's beautiful. Okay, now here is Bobby Burns. Bobby Burns was the great poet from Scotland. He's one who does Auld Lang Syne and a whole bunch of other great poems. And the Scottish people love him for good reason. Very patriotic and beautiful. And Bobby Burns, okay? So Bobby Burns installed pride in the Scottish people because they were pretty sad after the failure of Bonnie Prince Charles. They got the crap beaten out of them. So many of their guys are killed. The Highlands are going broke in the clearances. People are being forced out of their homes. It's sort of a sad disaster for the Scottish people. Some of them, they're sent to go live in Northern Ireland. Some of them flee overseas to the USA. And Walter Scott was a little bit younger than Bobby Burns. He knew Bobby Burns growing up and admired him greatly. And Bobby Burns, he had polio. That's why he's walking with a cane here. He had polio. Despite having polio in one leg, he was actually a pretty good soldier, and he greatly admired the Highlanders as soldiers. And as part of his healing routine for polio, he went out to the Highlands and he lived with some relatives, and he went around and talked to all these different Highlander families, and they told him all these stories about the Highlander Scots, about the battles with the British, and all of their history. And so he was an expert on the subject. And that motivated, at first, he wrote a bunch of poems, which were very popular, but then he wrote his landmark novel, which was called Waverley. Okay, and Waverley was a sensation. Back in those days, there was no distraction. They didn't have TV or radio or anything. So a new novel that came out, a lot of people could read. They had read the Bible. They could read this. Anything's easier to read than the Bible. So this is Waverley, about the Scots and the Highlander Scots fighting the British. And Waverley was actually about a British soldier named Waverley who had been stationed in Scotland. He got in trouble with the British, and he got pissed off, so he deserted the British. And then he loved the Scots, so he joined the Scots, and he became a member of the Scottish military there, and he fought against the British. And it explains all his thoughts, feelings, and conviction. And it was a real smart way for Walter Scott to set up the novel because he gave a fair point of view to both the British and the Scottish points of view. And this had a tremendous psychological effect on the British people as well as the Scottish people. The British, prior to that, had sort of saw the Highlanders as barbarian savages. After this, they respected them as, having honorable men, great soldiers, and very brave, standing up to the British when they're being tyrannized. So this was so popular, it made the Highlander areas a tourist attraction. Okay, and it did more than that. Walter Scott became like the most famous author ever from Scotland. Here's another cover for Waverley. Okay, and then here's another cover for him too. So it was heroism, it was romance, it was honor, it was sort of like, all kinds of good stuff. Here's Walter Scott also wrote books like Ivanhoe about chivalry and the knights. And again, this great strong sense of bravery and honor. And the Scottish people loved it. So here's what I mean by tourist attraction. All these people started wanting to go to the Highlands to visit for tourist attraction, and staying in hotels, and then they wanted to buy kilts. And what was funny about it was the same British who 50 years earlier had wanted to massacre and kill every single Highlander Scot now wanted to wear their kilts and their ties. By the way, I'm wearing a Scottish tie, the tartan. Okay. I'm wearing a green suit, which I'm wearing the entire month of March because it is the the green suit of my father for Ireland, St. Patrick's Day on the 17th. Seems like my webcam's working kind of slow. I don't know why. But anyways, so he basically brought tons of money to the Highlander Scot regions because he made everybody love the place. It installed a lot of pride, deservedly so, I think. Like I said, they're the greatest fighters ever in the history of the world from any population. I talked about that in a previous lecture. And then here's the Scottish ties. They're beautiful. Like I said, I got one on right now, and I own a couple other ones. So there it is. Hooray for the Highlanders.